the Browns, and it worked.
Yeah, it did work, and I don't think that's the last time we'll see that type of aggressive style of defense from their play. And it's like LG just said in the chat room. Hey, what do you expect? Pettin's a defensive-minded coach.
That's right.
True, but he can't put the shoulder pads on and go play anymore. He could espouse all he wants about how strong the defense is and what they need to do here and there. It's the guys that put on the equipment that have to go out and do it. And that's what they proved this week. And I'm sure they'll have more of those weeks. I believe they will.
Yeah, and I think this week is going to be, it's going to be physical. I'm telling you now. I think there's going to be some attrition. I wouldn't be surprised if both teams lose a couple guys to injury during the course of this game, because I can see it. This is going to be, in my opinion, that one of the more hard-hitting, just fired up Browns-Ravens games in a long time. And the crowd's going to be a big part of it, because think about it. For so many years now, 10 in a row, they've come in 0-1. Here comes week 2. By this point, we're usually 1-3 or something like that. And here we go again. Well, at least I get to hang out with my buddies in the Muni lot. They're coming thinking they can beat the Ravens. That crowd's going to be hot. It's going to be an atmosphere for some smash-mouth AFC North or some old-school AFC Central football, baby.
Well, there you go. And I'll tell you, it sure beats talking about who's getting the 2018 Super Bowl right now. That's cool.
Yeah, it beats talking about what's going on off the field, but unfortunately, we got to talk about that, too. I'll get to it in a second. Let me put you on the spot since you and I won't talk. What do you think? Do you think the Browns show up, play well? Baltimore's still a little bit better. Do they still got to cover that gap? Or do you think the Browns can pull this thing off and head into the bye 2-1 when 90% of the prognostications out there had them 0-3 heading into the bye?
It's so close that I have to call it a toss-up. But I would not be surprised if the Browns pulled out the upset. Okay, and I don't consider it an upset anymore because, like I said, the Ravens are not the same team they were that won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They're not as good, and obviously we're going to get to it. Without Rice running the ball there, it doesn't mean they don't have next man up, that they don't have guys, but they're not the same team. They have to worry more about the passing. And I understand what Deshaun said that Cleveland doesn't have the wide receivers that they think can win the one-on-one matchups. But don't be surprised if an offensive scheme shows itself. All right, these guys are smart guys, these assistant coaches. Don't be surprised if they make that work to their advantage by sending two guys, flooding the zone with two guys in the same zone, and then one breaks to the inside and one breaks to the outside. You're going to see a defender get crossed up, and that's where those receptions are going to happen.
Going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. So you got it as a toss-up, man. You're not gonna get off the fence there. What do you think, man?
All right, I'll. It's not whether or not I get off the fence. It's not that I don't think they can do it. I'm worried about the way the ball bounces. It's still, the game still has to be played, and the ball could take an odd bounce, and that could be it. I mean, let's just look what happened Sunday. Between the Giants and the Cardinals. The Giants were coming back. They were doing the usual second half comeback, and then they gave up that punt return for a touchdown. Everybody, I could just imagine all the guys in the press box at MetLife Stadium going, "Oh, not again."
I'll tell you what. Let me tell you guys, too, for those of you that look at this as just another game, let me put something at you here for looking at the start of the season. You guys have all heard about the 12% curse for the teams that start 0-2. Well, heading into the crucial third game of the season, if you look at all of the Super Bowl teams, all of them in history, 91% started the season 3-0 or 2-1 in the first 3 games of their season. So that'll show you that less than 10% of the team, and I'm not calling the Browns a Super Bowl team, I'm saying that's and obviously that speaks for itself, but looking at those teams, the breakdown, the split comes right there. Teams that start 2-1, there's been 34 of them that have gone on to the Super Bowl. Of the teams that started 1-2, only 5 have. And the playoff percentages are equal about to those percentages there. So it does show you, just like you talk about the difference between 1-1 and 0-2, the potential of your season opens up much differently when you start 2-1 than when you start 1-2. So that's just one of those little things that tends to play itself out over the long run there. But it doesn't need, you don't need stats. You don't need me to give you that to know that it's better to start 2-1 than 1-2. But just to add a little bit more to the significance of that, we'll see. Hey man, the Browns showing up. We talk about it with all the teams. You get the crowd, you get the opportunity, you get the situation, then you got to show up for it. So that's what they got to do this weekend. And if they do, cool. And if they don't, then we'll have some stuff to talk about on Monday. But I think they do, and I think they win this game. And I actually think this one would be more of an upset than beating the Saints. I said that last week. People thought I was nuts when I said I don't think it's that big of an upset that they beat down the road. But this I see as more, because the Ravens are... They're the old Browns. They're still the boss of the division, them and the Steelers, and they want to come in and show you what they got. So you got to go up there and send them out of Cleveland. And you're no longer welcome here. Hey, I want to segue off of that, talk a little bit about some of the stuff off the field. Adrian Peterson, for those of you not up on the latest with that situation, it's gone from bad to worse for Adrian Peterson and for the Vikings. Yesterday, when John McMullen and I were talking about this, we talked about the first child abuse allegations that came out and him turning himself in. Right as we were on the air, the announcement came that the Vikings had decided to reactivate him for this week's game. Well, since that happened, it's piled on even worse for them. They really may have chose to sit tight on that situation, because now, overnight, another past child abuse allegation has come out where he apparently is accused of over-disciplining another child different from this one a few years ago. That has now come out. The Vikings are getting all kinds of heat circling around them. Radisson, one of their big sponsors, has now pulled themselves out of being a sponsor temporarily. They've indefinitely suspended, which is what a lot of those same sponsors did with the Clippers at the end of the season there with the Donald Sterling thing. They suspended their sponsorship. So now you've got financial allegations. And then to throw it all out there, today the governor of Minnesota came out and blatantly said he also doesn't feel that it's a good look for Adrian Peterson to be out here playing in the middle of all this. And I've got to say, I don't know if you guys saw on I got to see the press conference yesterday. If you watched the Minnesota Vikings press conference, the general manager, what's his name? It's slipping my head. It's slipping my head. But he's out there yesterday, and he's Spielman. Yes, right. He's out there being totally disingenuous with the media. Some guy calls him right on the carpet and goes, "What about the pictures that you saw is unable for you to determine whether he should play or not?" And he's like, he starts looking down at his paper. Well, we of course we feel for the child, but we think the legal system should be allowed to play itself out. Well, you didn't let the legal system play itself out the week before. Then you didn't like the way your team played in the game. Then you reactivated your star running back. But now all of this, I think, I'm going to ask you what you think. I think they're going to change their mind. I don't think Peterson plays this week. Once you start getting the sponsors, once the governor, Mark Dayton, comes out and says, this guy should not be playing in this game, I don't care about due processing until this gets taken care of. What do you think about this whole thing? Quickly, it's starting to get out of control there for the Vikings. They should have never reinstated him. I don't know what made them come. It was a good idea.
Well, Jerry, obviously what I'm going to say next is not going to thrill a lot of people, but, politicians are usually a sports team's biggest fair weather fan, because when things are going great, the politician wants to be there to shake hands, glad hand, and hand out cigars. When things are not going great, they're the first ones to, hang you up like a dead deer and beat you with a stick. And personally, not that I don't think we need to be aware of these things and make changes when they're necessary. I also don't think that government should be interfering in sports that much. Okay, we have a problem already with the NFL having a tax exemption. If the NFL paid taxes like every other large corporation, if the NFL paid better insurance policies to their players after 5 years of retirement like every other corporation, they claim they wouldn't make enough money. Well, I hate to tell you this, but these guys are not hurting. They're not missing their $200 spa appointments, and they're not missing their home fitness gym, and they're not missing their chauffeur cars. Okay, these guys have more money than you and I could make in 3 lifetimes over. Okay, so personally, my feeling is politicians should let the owners and the general manager and the coaches do what they have to do until the government decides that they're going to fix everything that's wrong with sports. They should stay out of it until they have a cure for everything. That's just me personally. Now, that being said, I have no problem with the team suspending a player who's done something wrong. But I believe in due process, and I don't think that people are giving Adrian Peterson due process. He's not doing anything that your father or my father didn't do if we acted out when we were kids. And I'm going to tell you something. My father was a career federal law enforcement agent and a career military man. And he hit me 3 times my entire life. And I guarantee you that those 3 times was something I deserved, and that I made sure I never did that to get hit like that again. Because when I was 12 years old and I took $3 from my father's change box, I got the backhand across my face. Okay?
And I did too.
I deserved it.
I did too. That being said, Bill, I did too. I said this yesterday, that I do believe that you should be allowed to spank and discipline your children. My dad did. I understand all of that. That being said, my dad never whooped me as much that I ran away from him and somehow accidentally split my head open on the car seat. I'm just saying, my dad never actually drew blood when he whipped me either. I do believe that you should be allowed to do that, and in Texas they do allow corporal punishment, and that is legal. I do not believe in getting involved in the way people discipline their kids, but I've seen the pictures and I've seen what people are talking about, and I do believe that even when you do something with the right intentions, sometimes you go too far. Just like not everybody who drives and gets pulled over for a DUI had the intention of getting drunk and driving. Sometimes they really did have one too many, not realize it went too far overboard, especially when you're used to it. Like you said, when you were spanked, when you were hit with the switch, when you were disciplined, you're like, well, this is what my mom did to me. This I'm going to do to my kids. That same thing being said, there does need to be a level of responsibility. And I think that here's where I always drew the line. And I got to say that this is what I disagree with here with Adrian, where you got to question why. And it's if you're disciplining for a reason to get something changed or corrected in a behavior, that's fine. But when do you cross the line into disciplining with the intention of hurting, maybe not of hurting that bad, but to teach them a lesson? Because there's a fine line in how, and I just think that, I don't know, man. But regardless, to me, I agree with due process. But once you made the decision to deactivate him last week, in my feeling, the only reason he was reactivated on Monday is because you lost 30-7. That's why he was reactivated on Monday. If they had won that game, then I think that we may have sat tight and let this thing play out, especially, and I don't think they anticipated that when they made that announcement, more was going to come out. But here's what I found amazing is that the Vikings say they knew about that too. They say they knew about it before we knew about the 2013 incident where his child injured his head on the car seat trying to run away from a disciplining in the car, and the head wrapped in bandages there from the head wound. I mean, I'm just saying, I never was disciplined that bad that I split my head open. That you know what I mean? Like, I do think that we may be on the line here of, hey, maybe there might need to be some guidance and some counseling sessions. That's not wrong.
Me either. I'm going to disagree with you on that. Me either. I've never, my parents never hit me to draw blood.
Right.
There was never an anger hate thing going on. And is today's kids are much different than